John, fantastic. I'm on a roving mic. Is that okay for everybody? Just to make Greg blush, it sounds as though I'm from overseas, but I'm not. Well, unless you count the Shannon, because I live in Sligo, and I've just had a bet with him that I should deliver the whole address in a strong Sligo accent. I've accepted the challenge, and it seems to be going pretty well right now. I'm Toby. I've 3 or 4 interests. One of them is Pentacle. It's a business school. We work with MNEs, multinational enterprises. And so, yes, we have an interest in what makes really good businesses work. And the other one is no innovation. And we do something odd. I went along to my daughter's school, and there was, it was one of those show and tell days where you have to tell what your dad does. And there was a nurse there, who's my next door neighbour, and a fireman. And then they said, "So, Toby, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I talk to people and have a lot of coffee, and that's what we do. We do very large-scale, collaborative, creative problem solving." What I'd like to do today is just, rather than talk about the practicalities, which John so brilliantly outlined, is just talk about some of the intangibles, if that's okay. And also I want to introduce you to my ridiculously puerile sense of humour. And so, with huge apologies to the mayor and also to esteemed city manager and Deirdre as well, wherever she is, this is going to be really embarrassing later, because you'll just see how schoolboyish I am. But before we do all that, it's going to be hard for people sitting down, but for people at a desk, could you just very quickly, and I'm only going to give you 15 seconds to do this, draw an alien for me? If you've got a piece of paper in front of you and you're just draw an alien. Ten seconds. 5, 2, 1, 0. My guess, rough guess, is that all of those aliens probably have heads. They probably have 2 eyes. They possibly have limbs of some kind. Is that roughly right? No? You're a good, lovely exception. That's fantastic. I only say this because it's something which I'm very aware of, is that we're pretty lazy. Humans are pretty lazy. If there's an idea in our head which is already there, we'll tend to use it again. And so, because we're surrounded by people who look roughly like ourselves, we think, well, an alien is going to look roughly like us. We tend to take ideas that already exist and put those into place. And that's a real challenge for us, because we tend to repeat. It's not that we're truly lazy, that's probably me being a little bit nasty. We're just, we like an easy path. So that's problem 1 that we seem to encounter a lot. Problem 2 is this one. And I'm going to ask you a really hard question. For a second, I want you to focus on the screens and just for a moment tell me which one of these lines is longer. I'm only going to flash it up for a second. Okay, which is longer? Sorry? They're both the same. You've seen it before. How embarrassing is that? Well, actually, it's not, because I changed the rules. The one is longer than the other. And you all said the same, quite rightly, because I was really nasty about it. You all said exactly the same because when you were 9, a nice uncle took you aside and showed you a little joke, and it was all about parallax, or it was a brilliant physics teacher, and you went, oh, that's really nice, and you learnt the answer. And the thing is, we're all really bright. We wouldn't be in this room unless we were really, really clever. And the trouble with really, really clever people is we remember things. It's a real pain in the arse. Because when we remember things, it means that we assume that there is a way of doing things. So you remembered that actually the lines are the same. And of course they're not, because I've changed the rules. And that seems to be problem 2 that I encounter a lot when it comes to working with enterprises, or rather the ecosystems, I should say, in which enterprises work. The first one is we're a bit lazy. We like to take an easy route. The other one is that we carry knowledge liabilities with us, the stuff we know. So I want to tell you a few stories, if I may, and give you what I promised was a formula for how it works, and that's where I get really puerile, and you'll have to forgive me. This is Skolkovo Tech, Institute of Technology and Science, or Science and Technology, I should say. It's about 1.7 miles just outside Moscow, the MDK Ring Road. Skopjevo actually itself is 345 people. It's a tiny little village. But in there they've put Skopjevo Tech, Skopjevo Business School, the whole works. They're trying to create from scratch, a business ecosystem. And I'm working with MIT and some really cool colleagues to try and say, well, what would that ecosystem look like? What would it be, what would it be like if you could really create a fantastic ecosystem from scratch? There's a wonderful woman there called Emilia Amitova, and she is ridiculously clever. She has a fantastic startup idea, but it has taken her ages, let's say 10 years, to get this idea off the ground. And why? And you asked ourselves, why is it taking you so long? You are perhaps one of the most gifted people that we've ever come across. And she said, very, very straightforward, it came down, and this was her word, it came down to permission. It came down to permission. That was a really, really interesting word. He said, well, what's stopping you? Why do you need permission? And she said, well, everything in my background, everything that I do, everything that my parents have told me, my school children have told me, my teachers have told me, is that, well, when you grow up, you will do X. You will do X. Actually, this is a perfect example of exactly what she was encouraged to do. She was encouraged to get a job. Now, the truth is, she's a genius entrepreneur. She's an absolutely genius entrepreneur. But from the very, very start of life, she was told that she needed permission to do that. The moment she got permission, it was absolutely fine. And I just wonder, and it's a question I want to plant, is what can you do at your tables to think about, well, how do we create permission? How do we create permission for people to do things? Second quick story. Lars, who's one of the guys over here, he's an artist actually and an ethnographer, works in the Arctic. We have been running a thing called the Arctic Hub for some time, which is basically a way of trying to get all of the people who work in the Arctic, and there's a surprisingly large number of them, about the same size as live in Leitrim, which is close to my heart, work in the Arctic. Now, they are, the idea was, how can we create an ecosystem for enterprise in the Arctic? This is really hard because it's very big, very white, very cold, nobody wants to be there really. And also you've got lots and lots and lots of different people doing different things. You've got ice core samplers, you've got Inuit ethnographers, you've got people who want to rape and pillage the planet working for oil companies. You've got all sorts of different types of people, fishermen and of course the Inuit themselves. Now what was really interesting when talking to Lars is he said, well, my problem, my challenge here is that you've got the incentives wrong. And you say, what, there are thousands of incentives. There's millions of incentives. John outlined all the incentives that there were here in Dublin, and there are loads in the Arctic to set up new businesses. Okay, but he said, no, what you're misunderstanding is that you're talking about, there are almost too many incentives, if you like. Actually, what worries me is the incentives that I have to do something else. And what do you mean by that? He said, well, actually, I'm incentivized to report back to the company that I work for monthly. I'm incentivized to prepare an annual report which does X, Y, and Z. I'm incentivized to study only specific parts of this particular population. When I sell my art, I sell it, but in Finland, where I live. I'm not incentivized actually to do things which work here. So I suppose this comes down to my second question, which is, or just provocation for the tables when you come to work, which is, what incentives do we need to remove? What do we need to take away which actually get in the way at the moment? Things that are problematic. And so that's a big issue for me. Actually, I'm just going to skip over for a second. That is a picture of a Ferrari in a car park in Cambridge. And the reason I put it there is that that was the moment that I was doing some work for a Cambridge, basically a Cambridge innovation hub, probably one of the most successful ones in the UK. And that was the moment at which all other incentives became meaningless when a junior researcher aged 23 drove in with that. Because then what they suddenly realized was that previously they'd been incentivized, these are researchers, remember, not real people, They've previously been incentivized to write papers, to attend conferences, to make sure that their academic program was up to scratch. And those were bullshit incentives. They had to remove those to make sure that actually that incentive, which for this person was important, was significantly better. So incentives absolutely critical. DOT was a program which I initiated in the UK, designed at the time. It was run by the most fabulous man, John Thackeray, who some of you may know. And it was an attempt to take a city, Newcastle, which was horrendously deprived, and turn it into a fabulous enterprise ecosystem. It failed. Don't tell anybody. It was okay. But one of the things the reason it failed is we were putting more and more initiatives in. It was another initiative. Oh, let's do that. And we were trying to get some feedback about how and why it failed. And a brilliant woman came up to us and said, it's the problem you've got is that you're providing wonderful initiatives, that's fantastic, but you're not providing us platforms. You're not giving us platforms. So the structures you put in place are just wrong. What we need is some kind of continuity. I want to know that when I take part in something, it will last for a long time. I don't actually want to be interfered with. I don't want just another short-term activity which is just targeted at me, and then we'll move on to somewhere else. It's short-termism, and with great and loving respect to Lord Mayor, it's short-termist politics as well. Politicians love snipping ribbons, saying this thing is starting. But actually, that doesn't really work very well when you're trying to create a culture or an ecosystem. So my third letter is S for systems or structures. And finally, in my list of letters, is this one. Now, if you come across the name rather, Drew Endy, invest in him. He is the next Steve Jobs. He's an absolutely extraordinary, wonderful man, and he works in Stanford, at the university there, and he is a pioneer in synthetic biology. We've been working with him basically to create an industry around synthetic biology. Which is kind of hard because it only exists in 3 places: Stanford, a very small area in South Kensington, and South Korea. And that's it. So from that we want to create an industry. Of course, what we don't want to do is to create an industry that is like genetically modified organisms, because that goes down very badly in Europe. It's fine in America, but it goes down very badly in Europe. Now what's interesting about Drew is that he creates life, and his colleagues, they create life. That's kind of challenging. From every point of view, it's really quite challenging. In fact, just to sort of go off on a slight tangent, he has his own dedicated FBI agent, who's called Ed Yu, Y-O-U. And he has the best job title in the entire planet. He is FBI's Special Agent, Weapons of Mass Destruction Directorate, Biological Countermeasures Unit. Which is cool by anybody's estimation. And the first time I ever had a meeting with him, he had to call off because he had a cold, which is kind of anyway, Drew is he's over next week at Imperial College doing the next big wave of SynBio rollouts, and that's where I'll be. But he says to me, he's really interesting about this because he says, I want to create this ecosystem of enterprise around, a global ecosystem of enterprise around synthetic biology. Cool. I said, well, what's holding you back? And he said, well, the thing is, put it this way, I don't want to create a company. How long does it take me to create a company? Even in a really, really fast environment, how long does it take me to create a company? I said, I don't know. He said, it'll take me 4 weeks, even if I just buy it off the shelf. 4 weeks is too long. It's just too long. I don't need all of those things, those implements in place. It does, I will need it when I come to scaling up, but actually when creating rapid, very speedy change and developing new ideas, I don't need all that paraphernalia around it. So for him, speed is the fourth key letter, S for speed. So those are my four, I suppose, four conditions that I have been learning about that seem to help, or it seem to get in the way of perhaps other people when they're trying to create innovation or enterprise ecosystems. But I've got one final observation. Working with a lovely group, big program in the northeast of Scotland called Design in Action. It's about rural enterprise. How do we drive rural enterprise right across that area, which basically is Inverness, up there, down to around Aberdeen, Dundee, into Perth. Really beautiful, Highlands area, highly fragmented, very highly distributed. Now, they've got an interesting problem there, which is that there are, and I don't want to draw any comparisons, but there are no jobs. There are no jobs there. There's a bit of tourism, it's seasonal. If you work in the oil industry, you're fine. There is no recession in Aberdeen. It's quite extraordinary. You see everybody driving around in a Bentley. Even the au pair has a Bentley. But they realise that the majority of people are not in that category. Now, what's fascinating is that they then shared with me another new phrase, which was, everybody keeps talking about opportunities. Opportunities. I said, well, there are no opportunities where we are. I said, okay, that's really interesting. So then how can we in what way can we create a future which works for you? And they said, well, we have to think about possibilities. Opportunities are too late. If we're presented with an opportunity, then I know as a small business person that 50 other people will go for those things. 100 other people will go for those things. So actually, an ecosystem that works for me isn't supporting opportunity, it's supporting possibility. Because I can make a business out of possibility, but I can't make a business out of opportunity because I will always be later than somebody else, or more expensive, or lower quality than somebody else. And this is Duale, and he is a poster boy, obviously, because he's good looking, for a company that we do quite a lot of work with called FinTrack. FinTrack, interestingly, is a commercial organisation based on the eastern seaboard of the States. And they're commercial, but they provide long-term support to developing countries to develop enterprise. And we're working with them in sub-Saharan Africa and South America to try and create these innovation ecosystems that I talked about. Now, what's interesting about him is he said exactly the same thing. I have no opportunity. There is absolutely no opportunity where I live. I need to find an ecosystem that supports possibility instead. So my final question for you is how to support possibility rather than opportunity. Now this is where I get into puerile schoolboyishness. If you've been following me, sorry, this is possibly the result. If you've been following me, then you end up with my equation, which is P divided by PIS, but which just gives you an example of how really crass my humour is. P possibilities minus opportunities divided by PIS, which is the God, I can't remember now. What's the first one? Thank you. Incentives, structures or systems, and speed. Because those seem to be, from my perspective, the things that seem to get in the way, or what I've been learning from the rather brilliant people I work with. So if one starts to challenge those, one starts to develop the kind of intangible ecosystem which it appears to be important to people. So I leave with a few questions, just for the tables as you work through things. How can we model behaviours that give permission for enterprise? This is an interesting branding question more than anything else. What is it that the City Council, the Mayor, can do in their behaviours that give people permission, that make people think, actually, I could set up a business? Because at the moment, most large organisations, and I count the City Council as one of those things, pretty much does not behave, and forgive me, just put your hands over these, doesn't behave as though it's a young startup enterprise. It doesn't. It just doesn't. So what behaviours could you model to demonstrate to other people that actually, yeah, the way we collect our rubbish, the way we clean our streets, is open to enterprise as well? In what way can we remove incentives that send confusing signals? So in what way can we stop incentivising people to do stuff which actually stops enterprise? How can we structure platforms for enterprise rather than programs? So instead of giving people yet another initiative, create a platform that allows them to do what the hell they want to do? And finally, what can we do to get away out of the way of speed? In a very rapidly changing world, what is it that we can do to make sure we don't get in the way? On the nail of time. Thanks very much.